Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The shuttle hummed as it descended through the thick, lavender-hued atmosphere of Virental. Captain Elias Ward leaned back in his seat, his weathered face betraying a mix of unease and determination. First contact missions were always fraught with unpredictability, and this one seemed destined to be no exception. "Remember, Captain," came the voice of mission control through his earpiece, "you're there to represent the best of humanity. Be respectful, and whatever you do, don't insult their traditions." Yeah, Elias muttered, adjusting the sleek black case at his side. Inside was the Terra Vox organ, a marvel of human engineering meant to impress the Azralan, a blend of craftsmanship and art that played deep, resonant notes capable of moving even the most stoic heart. The shuttle touched down smoothly on a floating platform encased in what looked like crystalline vines. Outside, a delegation of Azralan awaited, their bioluminescent skin shimmering in the soft light of Virental's twin suns. Elias took a deep breath, adjusted his uniform, and stepped out. Lady Zirin, the Azralan envoy, was the first to approach. Her presence was commanding, her tall, lithe frame adorned with intricate silver and emerald robes that seemed to flow like liquid. Her violet eyes studied Elias with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Captain Elias Ward," she said, her voice melodic but edged with authority. "Welcome to Virental. We have heard much of your kind's peculiarities." Elias suppressed a smirk. "Thank you for the invitation, Lady Zirin. Humanity is honored to meet the Azralan." Her gaze drifted to the case in his hands. "And this is the artifact you promised? An object of great significance, I presume?" "Yes," Elias replied, setting the case down and opening it to reveal the organ. The Azralan delegation leaned in, their glowing features betraying awe. Elias played a single, deep note. The sound resonated across the platform, a rich and haunting melody that seemed to echo in the very air. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the Azralan began murmuring amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and something else Elias couldn't quite place. Lady Zirin stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Curious. We did not anticipate such size." Elias blinked, caught off guard. It's an organ. It's supposed to be large to produce the sound." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Indeed. A fascinating display of human capability. We shall discuss this further." As Elias followed the delegation into the crystalline palace, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Azralan were intrigued by more than just the music. Something told him this mission was about to become far more complicated than he'd anticipated. Elias followed the Azralan delegation through a winding corridor carved into the crystalline palace. Light refracted through the walls, painting prismatic patterns across their elegant features. His boots clicked on the smooth, glass-like floor, the sound stark against the whispery voices of the Azralan. Lady Zirin led the way, her robes flowing like liquid silver. She glanced over her shoulder at him occasionally, her gaze as unreadable as it was unsettling. The group entered a spacious hall filled with floating platforms and intricate, holographic displays. Elias couldn't help but gawk at the advanced technology, though he quickly schooled his expression. No need to give them the satisfaction of knowing how impressed he was. "Captain Elias," Zirin began, turning to face him. Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of amusement in her tone. "The organ you brought is fascinating. Its sound is unlike anything we have encountered, but its proportions raise questions." Elias furrowed his brow. "Proportions? It's a large instrument because it needs to produce a wide range of sounds." A ripple of laughter spread through the Azralan delegation, their bioluminescent faces lighting up in shades of teal and gold. Lady Zirin raised a hand to quiet them, her own lips twitching in a restrained smile. Yes," she said. "But among the Azralan, size is often an indicator of potential. A larger construct implies greater energy reserves or a more complex purpose." Elias blinked, suddenly aware of how easily cultural misunderstandings could spiral out of control. "Well, I assure you, it's just an instrument. It represents human ingenuity, not whatever you're imagining. Zirin tilted her head, studying him. Then perhaps your kind's ingenuity is more vast than we anticipated. Your species continues to surprise. Another wave of murmurs swept through the delegation. Elias could pick out fragments of their discussion, words like resilience, adaptability, and unusual. He decided to redirect the conversation. So, what happens next? Are we moving forward with the cultural exchange? Zirin's smile widened, and Elias couldn't decide if it was welcoming or predatory. Indeed. But first, we have prepared a series of discussions and observations. We wish to understand humanity better. A smaller, younger Azraelin stepped forward, holding a tablet-like device covered in shifting glyphs. She addressed Elias with an air of formality. Captain Ward, your presence has piqued our intellectual curiosity. You will be subjected to a series of inquiries and demonstrations to evaluate your kind's potential. Elias raised an eyebrow. Evaluations? I thought this was supposed to be a diplomatic mission. Diplomacy requires understanding, Zirin replied smoothly. You have impressed us with your organ. Now, we wish to see if humanity is equally impressive in other aspects. The evaluations began in a large circular chamber adorned with glowing orbs that hovered in midair. The Azraelins seated themselves in a semicircle, their robes shimmering like waterfalls of light. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal, upon which Elias was asked to place the Terra Vox organ. The first test was a simple one, or so Elias thought. Play your instrument, Zirin instructed, but create a new melody, one that reflects your species' spirit. Elias sighed. Improvisation wasn't exactly his forte, but he had been briefed on how much the Azraelin valued creativity. He powered up the organ, the machine humming softly as it activated. Fingers danced over the keys, producing a haunting melody that built slowly, rising and falling like waves. It was a piece Elias had made up during long, lonely nights on deployment, a reflection of both hope and despair. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Even the faint hum of the floating orbs seemed to have quieted. Zirin's violet eyes fixed on him, unreadable. Then, slowly, she began to clap, a soft and deliberate sound. The rest of the Azraelin followed suit, their glowing hands creating a strange, otherworldly applause. Fascinating, Zirin said. Your music conveys emotions we do not easily express. It is raw, unpolished, but powerful. Elias frowned. Was that a compliment or an insult? Another Azraelin stepped forward, her bioluminescence pulsing in patterns Elias suspected were linked to her mood. But what of human endurance? Music is but one aspect of ingenuity. Let us test their resilience. Before Elias could object, the floor beneath him shifted, the pedestal sinking into the ground. He stumbled slightly, but regained his footing as the chamber transformed. The walls grew taller, the floating orbs rearranging themselves into a maze-like configuration. Elias's training kicked in, and he instinctively scanned his surroundings. "What is this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension in his chest. "A test," Zirin replied from above, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Navigate the maze and reach the exit. But be warned, this challenge is not merely physical. It will test your adaptability and intellect." Elias moved cautiously through the maze, his senses heightened. The walls shifted unpredictably, forcing him to adjust his path constantly. As he progressed, holographic projections appeared, presenting puzzles and riddles he had to solve to advance. One puzzle involved aligning glowing symbols to match a sequence displayed on a hovering screen. Another required him to calculate a complex equation, the answer unlocking a hidden door. Despite the challenges, Elias couldn't help but marvel at the Azraelins' ingenuity. Their technology was light years ahead of anything on Earth, yet it felt almost intuitive. Halfway through the maze, a low hum filled the air. Elias turned to see a holographic creature materialize, a sleek, feline-like predator with glowing eyes and sharp, translucent claws. "Of course," he muttered, drawing the small combat knife he always carried. The creature lunged, but Elias sidestepped, using his knife to disable its projection matrix. The hologram flickered and vanished. When he finally emerged from the maze, slightly winded but otherwise unscathed, he found the Azralan delegation waiting. Ziren's expression was one of mild surprise, her glowing features shifting subtly. "You continue to exceed our expectations, Captain," she said. "Few have completed the maze unscathed." Elias shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Humans are full of surprises." Ziren stepped closer, her voice lowering so only he could hear. "Indeed. But I suspect there is much you are not telling us." Elias met her gaze, his jaw tightening. "That makes two of us." For the first time, Ziren's composure faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Perhaps," she said, her tone thoughtful. "But for now, let us continue. There is still much to learn about each other." As Elias followed her back into the crystalline palace, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Azralan were testing more than just humanity's capabilities. Something deeper was at play, something that could shape the future of both their species. Elias woke early the next morning, his body sore from the physical trials of the maze, but his mind restless. The Azralan had been polite, even impressed by his performance, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was a chess piece on a board he didn't fully understand. He glanced at the Terra Vox organ resting in its case by his bedside. The instrument had done its job as a cultural ambassador, but now it seemed to symbolize something much larger, an expectation he wasn't sure humanity could meet. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts, signaling a visitor. The crystalline door to his quarters slid open, revealing Lady Ziren. "Captain Ward," she said, her bioluminescent features glowing faintly in the dim light. "I trust you slept well." Elias smirked. "Well enough, considering your tests weren't exactly designed for comfort." Ziren raised an elegant eyebrow. "You performed admirably, but your challenges are far from over. The Council has decided on the next phase of your evaluation." Elias leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. "Why does this feel less like diplomacy and more like boot camp?" Ziren's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Perhaps because, in some ways, it is. The Azralan do not take alliances lightly. We value strength and creativity, but we also value commitment. We must ensure humanity is a worthy partner." "Fine," Elias said. "What's next?" Ziren stepped closer, her violet eyes locking onto his. "Tonight, you will participate in our grand symposium, a gathering of our most esteemed minds. You will be required to demonstrate not just your physical and intellectual abilities, but your adaptability and creativity under pressure." Elias's stomach tightened. He wasn't a scientist or an artist. He was a soldier. Still, he nodded. "Guess I don't have much of a choice." The grand symposium was held in an enormous amphitheater that seemed to hover above a glowing ocean of liquid light. Hundreds of Azralan filled the tiers of seating, their bioluminescence creating a dazzling mosaic of colors. In the center of the amphitheater was a circular platform where Elias now stood, feeling exposed under the weight of so many alien eyes. Lady Ziren stood at his side, her presence both reassuring and unnerving. "The first task," she announced, her voice echoing through the chamber, "will test your creativity. Captain Ward, you must take the Terra Vox organ and use it to produce a composition that speaks to the values of your people." Elias suppressed a groan. Of course, they wanted another performance. He approached the organ, activating its intricate array of keys and levers. This time, he drew inspiration from humanity's resilience. The melody started slow and somber, reflecting the hardships and struggles of Earth's history. Then it grew, gaining momentum, until it became a triumphant anthem of survival and hope. When he finished, the amphitheater was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Azralan began to clap, softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Their glowing hands pulsed in rhythm with their applause, creating a mesmerizing display. "Impressive," Ziren said, her tone unreadable. "But creativity is only one aspect of strength. Let us proceed to the next challenge." The second task was a game of strategy. Elias was led to a holographic table, where he faced an Azralan opponent, a towering male named Krythar, whose glowing patterns suggested a high rank. The game, called Luminaris, was a blend of chess and tactical warfare. The objective was to control more territories on a holographic map by outmaneuvering your opponent. Krythar smirked as he made the first move, his pieces glowing as they claimed strategic points. Elias studied the board, recognizing the alien's aggressive strategy. He countered with calculated caution, allowing Krythar to overextend before launching a series of rapid, precise moves that turned the tide. As the game progressed, the audience murmured in surprise. Krythar's confident smirk faded into a look of frustration as Elias outmaneuvered him at every turn. Finally, with a decisive move, Elias claimed victory. Krythar scowled but offered a grudging nod of respect. The crowd erupted into glowing applause once more, and Elias allowed himself a small smile. "Your adaptability is remarkable," Zirin said as she stepped forward. "Few have bested Krythar in Luminaris. You continue to surprise us, Captain Ward." "Glad I could keep things interesting," Elias replied, his tone laced with dry humor. The final task was the most unexpected. A massive projection filled the amphitheater, displaying a scenario, a simulated crisis in which a Carrick Dominion fleet threatened to attack an Azralan outpost. Elias was tasked with devising a plan to defend the outpost using limited resources. As he analyzed the simulation, Elias felt a surge of confidence. This was his element. He quickly outlined a strategy that involved deploying decoy ships to draw the Carrick fleet into a trap while the main Azralan forces launched a surprise counterattack. The simulation played out exactly as he predicted, with the Azralan outpost emerging unscathed and the Carrick fleet in disarray. The crowd erupted into cheers, their glowing hands creating a dazzling display of approval. Zirin approached him, her expression a mix of admiration and curiosity. "You have proven yourself in ways we did not anticipate, Captain Ward. Humanity may indeed be more than what we expected." Elias met her gaze, his voice steady. "We're just getting started." As the symposium concluded, Elias was led to a private chamber where Zirin awaited him. "You've impressed the council," she said, her tone softer now. "But there is still one more question that remains unanswered." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Zirin stepped closer, her glowing features casting a warm light. "What drives humanity? What is it that makes your species so resilient?" Elias hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. "A lot of things. Survival, curiosity, the need to prove ourselves. But mostly it's the connections we make, the people we fight for." Zirin studied him for a long moment, her violet eyes searching his face. "Perhaps there is more common ground between us than I thought." Elias nodded. "Maybe. But I get the feeling this alliance won't be easy." Zirin smiled, a genuine expression this time. "Nothing worth having ever is." As she turned to leave, Elias couldn't help but wonder what the future held, for humanity, for the Azralan, and for the fragile bond they had begun to forge. After the events of the Grand Symposium, Elias felt a strange sense of accomplishment, tempered by an even stranger unease. The Azralan had accepted him as a representative of humanity, but their lingering gazes and cryptic remarks hinted at deeper motives. That unease grew the following day, when Zirin arrived at his quarters with a rare expression of solemnity. "Captain Ward," she began, her voice low, "the council has made a decision. You are to accompany me to the Vault of Reverence." Elias frowned. "Vault of Reverence? Sounds ominous." Zirin's glowing features shifted to a dim teal, an emotion he couldn't yet decipher. "It is where the Azralans safeguard our greatest truths and greatest fears." The vault was located deep beneath the crystalline city, accessible only by a levitating platform that descended into the planet's core. As Elias and Zirin traveled downward, the air grew cooler, the light from the walls dimmer. "This feels more like a prison than a place of reverence," Elias muttered. Zirin glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Some truths are too dangerous to leave unguarded. What you are about to see has been kept secret for millennia. Even among my people, only a select few are permitted entry." When they reached the vault, Elias was struck by its stark contrast to the elegance of the city above. The chamber was cavernous and dimly lit, its walls carved from black stone veined with faintly glowing blue lines. At the center stood a massive, obelisk-like structure, pulsing with an eerie, rhythmic light. Zirin gestured for him to follow as she approached the obelisk. This is the Echo Core. It holds the memories of our ancestors, their knowledge and warnings. But it also contains something else. She placed a hand on the obelisk, and the pulsing light intensified. A holographic projection emerged, displaying a three-dimensional star map. Elias recognized the Milky Way instantly, but something was wrong. Entire regions of the galaxy were marked with red, spreading like a scar across the map. "What am I looking at?" Elias asked, his voice tense. "This," Zirin replied, "is the path of destruction wrought by the Carrick Dominion. They are not simply conquerors, Captain Ward. They are exterminators. And their sights are set on your world." Elias's stomach dropped. "You're saying Earth is next?" Zirin nodded. "The Dominion views humanity as a threat, not because of your strength, but because of your potential. They fear what you could become." Elias stared at the projection, his mind racing. Earth had only just begun to venture beyond its solar system. To think they were already on the radar of a galactic power was both terrifying and absurd. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked. "Because we believe humanity is key to stopping them," Zirin said. "But the Council is divided. Some fear your unpredictability. Others see your ingenuity as a weapon that could tip the balance." Elias crossed his arms. "And you? Where do you stand?" Zirin hesitated, her glowing features flickering between colors. "I believe humanity's spirit, the very thing that drives you to overcome impossible odds, may be our only hope. But there is a condition." "Of course there is," Elias muttered. "What is it?" "You must lead a joint mission against a Dominion outpost," Zirin said. "If you succeed, it will prove humanity's worth. If you fail, the Council will have no choice but to reconsider the alliance." Elias's jaw tightened. The stakes couldn't be higher. "When do we leave?" The mission was set for the following day. Elias spent the hours leading up to it in intense preparation, studying maps of the Dominion outpost and familiarizing himself with the Azraelans' advanced weaponry. He was also introduced to his team, a mix of human and Azraelan operatives. Among them was Krythar, the Azraelan he had defeated in the strategy game during the Grand Symposium. Despite their earlier rivalry, Krythar offered a curt nod of respect. "I'll admit, human," Krythar said, his voice deep and resonant. "I doubted your abilities. But your tactics in Luminaris were impressive. Let us hope they serve us well in battle." Elias extended a hand, and after a brief hesitation, Krythar shook it. "Let's focus on getting through this alive," Elias said. The mission began with a stealthy approach to the Dominion outpost, a massive structure built into the side of a jagged, barren asteroid. The team split into two groups, with Elias leading the infiltration squad while Krythar commanded the diversionary force. As they navigated the dark, narrow corridors of the outpost, Elias couldn't help but marvel at the Dominion's technology. The walls seemed to hum with energy, and the air was thick with an oppressive sense of control. Their objective was clear: disable the outpost's communication array to prevent reinforcements from being called. But as they reached the control room, they encountered unexpected resistance. A squad of Dominion soldiers, their tall, insectoid frames armed with plasma rifles. The battle was intense and chaotic. Elias barked orders, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The Azraelan operatives moved with grace and precision, their bioluminescent patterns shifting in response to their emotions. Elias fought alongside them, his human instincts for improvisation and adaptability proving invaluable. At one point, he used the environment to his advantage, triggering a collapse of a storage unit to trap the enemy in a narrow corridor. With the Dominion soldiers neutralized, Elias and his team secured the control room. Zirin, who had accompanied the infiltration squad, worked quickly to hack into the communication array. "We don't have much time," she said, her glowing fingers flying over the holographic interface. "Their reinforcements are already en route." Elias glanced at the door, his gut telling him they were running out of options. "Then we make this quick. Krythar, what's your status?" He had always been a soldier, trained to follow orders, to protect, to fight. But this was something else entirely. This was a choice that could shape the future of the entire galaxy. Zirin, Elias said after a long pause, his voice calm but resolute. I don't know what the right answer is. But I know this. I'm not going to let humanity be anyone's pawn. We'll decide our future on our terms. And if we have to fight to get there, so be it. Zirin regarded him with a mix of admiration and caution. You're brave, Captain. But bravery alone may not be enough. The Karuk are a formidable enemy. They have technology and resources that far surpass anything humanity has ever known. I'm not afraid of their technology, Elias said, his eyes narrowing. I'm not afraid of anything that wants to hold humanity back. We fight for our future, no matter the cost. Zirin was silent for a moment, then nodded. You are right. We will need allies, more than ever. If you are to defy the Dominion, the Azraelin will stand with you. But be warned, there are those within our ranks who fear this choice as much as the Karuk do. Not everyone will support you. Elias glanced at her, his mind already racing ahead to the challenges that lay ahead. I didn't expect an easy road. But I'll take it. Zirin's bioluminescence flickered, a signal of respect and perhaps even understanding. Then prepare yourself, Captain Ward. The true battle is just beginning. As Elias gazed out at the stars, a burning resolve ignited within him. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. He would lead humanity into the future, no matter what it took. And the Karuk Dominion would learn that no empire could control the destiny of humanity. Elias barely slept that night. His mind churned with thoughts of the galaxy's fate, humanity's fate, and the terrible weight of the decision that lay before him. The Karuk Dominion, the largest and most powerful empire in the galaxy, had been watching Earth for centuries, preparing for a day when they would either absorb or destroy the human race. Now, that day was rapidly approaching. As the crew gathered for their briefing the following morning, the tension was palpable. Everyone, from the elite Azraelin soldiers to the human operatives, sensed the gravity of what lay ahead. There was no turning back now. Zirin stood before them, her presence commanding despite the uncertainty that clouded her eyes. Her bioluminescence flickered erratically, signaling the internal struggle that she had kept hidden until now. We've received word from our allies, Zirin began, her voice steady but sharp. The Dominion is consolidating its forces. The time for negotiation is over. The Karuk will make their offer soon. And when they do, we must be ready to make our choice. Elias surveyed the room, his gaze settling on each of the team members. Krythar stood at attention, his posture as rigid as ever, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The rest of the Azraelin soldiers were focused, their senses heightened as if they could already feel the impending storm. The human operatives were no less tense. Elias had worked with them before, and they were ready to fight, but the atmosphere was different now. This wasn't just another battle. This was a war for the very soul of humanity. Zirin continued, her voice unwavering despite the gravity of the situation. Our first objective is to find the Karuk emissary. He will be the one delivering the offer to us. We cannot let him leave our reach until we have answers. What answers? Elias asked. We know they want to either ally with us or destroy us. What's left to discuss? Zirin's eyes softened, her gaze turning to the holographic star map that projected from the center of the table. We need to understand their terms. Why now? Why are they making this move? There are fragments of the Karuk legend that suggest the Dominion has been preparing for a war with humanity for a long time, decades, if not centuries. But there's more. Something they've hidden. Elias stood up, his jaw tight. I'm not here to play their games, Zirin. We're going to fight them, not negotiate with them. Zirin met his gaze, her features softening slightly. I understand your anger, Elias. But this isn't just about a war. It's about understanding what we're up against. The Karuk are not just a military force. They are a civilization that has mastered biology, technology, and warfare. If we are to survive, we need to know what drives them, what they fear. And, most importantly, we need to know what they will do next. Elias didn't respond immediately. His mind flashed to the faces of the civilians back on Earth, his family, his friends. If humanity was to survive, they needed to be ready for anything the Dominion might throw at them. He clenched his fists. Then let's find this emissary. Their ship, the Saber's Edge, dropped out of hyperspace near a remote system at the edge of Dominion-controlled space. Zirin had managed to gather intelligence that suggested the Carrick emissary was meeting with representatives from a neutral species, the Cylon, who had a reputation for neutrality and diplomacy in galactic affairs. This was their chance to intercept him before he could make contact with the Dominion fleet. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Cylon trade station, find the emissary, and extract him for questioning. If he was carrying vital information, it would be humanity's key to understanding the Carrick's next move. As the crew prepared for the operation, Elias couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. The mission felt like a trap. The Carrick were always one step ahead, and he knew it.
But what choice did they have?
Time was running out, and humanity's future was at stake. "We'll be approaching the station in an hour," Zirin said, breaking his reverie. "Stay sharp. The Cylon aren't our enemies, but we don't know how they'll react to our presence." Elias nodded. "Understood. We go in quiet, extract the emissary, and get out before anyone knows we're there." The team disembarked in small groups, using stealth pods to approach the trade station. The station itself was an impressive structure, sleek and streamlined, with long docking arms extending into the void. It was a bustling hub of commerce, with ships from all corners of the galaxy coming and going. The Carrick emissary would be among them, though hidden in plain sight. Once aboard, the team split into two groups, one to locate the emissary and the other to secure the communications hub and monitor any incoming transmissions. Elias led the search for the emissary, his team of elite Azralan soldiers moving quickly through the darkened corridors, their glowing patterns providing the only light in the otherwise dim station. They had been moving for almost an hour when they finally caught a break. A group of Cylon traders had gathered near a secured meeting room at the far end of the station, whispering among themselves. The door was slightly ajar, and Elias could see the figure they were speaking with, a tall, humanoid figure wearing the ornate, ceremonial robes of a Carrick diplomat. His features were indistinct, his face hidden behind a mask of polished black metal. Elias motioned for his team to spread out, moving silently into position. He signaled Zirin, who was on comms, her voice crackling through the earpiece. "We've located the emissary. We need to move now." Zirin's voice came through clearly. "You're clear to proceed, Captain. We'll provide backup if necessary. But be cautious. This is likely a trap." Elias didn't need to hear any more. With a nod, he pushed forward, signaling his team to take their positions around the room. As they approached, he noticed something odd. The Carrick emissary wasn't alone. There were others with him, hidden in the shadows. Silent, waiting. Just as Elias stepped into the doorway, a sharp voice rang out. "Human, you're not as subtle as you think." Before Elias could react, the emissary's mask slid off, revealing a cold, emotionless face, a Carrick general. He was surrounded by a squad of elite Carrick soldiers, each armed with high-powered energy rifles. They had been expecting him. The trap had been sprung. Elias's mind raced. There was no way out. They were surrounded, and the Carrick weren't interested in negotiations. The general's voice echoed through the room, cold and final. "You have been a thorn in our side for too long, human. Now, you will see the full extent of our power." Elias knew the game had changed. This wasn't a simple diplomatic mission anymore. The Dominion was ready to make their move, and humanity was at the heart of their plans. The Carrick general stood across from Elias, his cold eyes locked on him, scanning for any sign of hesitation. Around him, the elite soldiers of the Dominion moved into position, their weapons trained on the human and Azralan operatives. The trap was complete, and there was no escape. But Elias wasn't ready to concede just yet. He had always been a soldier, trained to think quickly, act decisively. In this moment, everything hinged on his ability to outwit the Carrick, to turn this ambush into an advantage. The general's voice was smooth but lethal. "You've fought valiantly, human, but your efforts are futile. You will surrender now, or you will die with your crew. Your choice." Elias held his ground, his mind calculating the odds, his pulse steady despite the overwhelming pressure. There was no room for panic. There was no room for fear. Humanity's future was in his hands, and he would not allow it to slip through his fingers so easily. His gaze flicked over his team. Krythar, the stoic Azralan leader, Zirin, calm but fierce, and the human operatives, all ready for action. They were trained for situations like this, but nothing had prepared them for the magnitude of this moment. "We're not here to surrender," Elias said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "We fight for our survival, for our future." The general's lips curled into a tight smile. "Your survival is no longer within your control. The Carrick have already decided the fate of humanity. You will either submit, or you will be eradicated." He raised his hand, signaling to his soldiers to advance. But just as the Carrick moved, Zirin acted. With a fluid motion, she activated a hidden device on her wrist, sending out a burst of electromagnetic interference that scrambled the Carrick soldiers' weapons. In the confusion, Krythar and the others sprang into action. The Azralan soldiers moved with precision, their agility and strength overpowering the Carrick soldiers. Elias took advantage of the chaos, grabbing a fallen Carrick rifle and firing a shot toward the general. The blast was aimed for the general's chest, but he was faster than Elias anticipated. The shot narrowly missed, ricocheting off the metallic walls. The general's eyes narrowed. "You think you can fight us, human? You are outmatched." As he spoke, the Carrick soldiers regrouped, their weapons now fully functional. They began to return fire, the energy beams crackling through the air. Elias and his team ducked behind cover, their minds working quickly to formulate a plan. Elias's thoughts raced. They had to create a distraction, something big enough to give them a chance to escape. He turned to Zirin. "We need a way out. Can you disrupt their communications? Buy us time." Zirin nodded, her glowing fingers dancing over the control panel in front of her. "It'll take a few moments. Hold them off." Krythar moved into position, his combat form flawless. He and the rest of the Azralan soldiers began to push forward, taking out Carrick soldiers with precision strikes, each one a blur of speed and power. But the Carrick were relentless, and their numbers were overwhelming. The tide was turning. Elias's eyes darted to the general, who was watching the battle unfold with a detached interest. It was clear that the general wasn't concerned. The Carrick were an advanced species, so advanced that they didn't feel the need to fight for victory. They simply expected it. That was their mistake. Elias signaled to his team, his voice cold and calculated. "We need to take out the general. If we don't, they'll keep coming." Without hesitation, Krythar and Zirin moved into position, their steps silent but sure. The moment they struck, the Carrick soldiers fell back, but the general remained calm, his posture regal and composed. He was more than just a soldier, he was a symbol of the Dominion's power. "You are wasting your time," the general said, his voice a low, menacing hum. "The Carrick will not bow to the likes of you. We have crushed entire civilizations, and we will crush yours as well. Your fight is futile." But Elias wasn't listening to him. His eyes were locked on the general's movements, searching for any opening. He knew that if they could take the general down, the Carrick soldiers would lose their focus. They were strong, but without leadership, they would falter. The plan was simple: create a diversion, take the general out of the equation, and make a run for it. It wasn't ideal, but it was their only shot. Elias's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted toward the general, using the chaos to his advantage. He leapt over a barricade, drawing the Carrick general's attention for just a moment, enough time for Zirin to strike. With a burst of speed, Zirin moved in, her energy blades flashing in the dim light of the station. The general's eyes widened in surprise as she lunged, but his reaction was too slow. In a blur of motion, Zirin's blades connected with his body, striking deep into his chest. The general gasped, a look of disbelief crossing his face as he staggered back. For a moment there was silence. The Carrick soldiers paused, unsure of what to do. The leader they had followed was now on the ground, his life quickly slipping away. Then, in a single, coordinated effort, Elias and Krythar moved in. They took advantage of the momentary confusion, knocking down Carrick soldiers with brutal force, their weapons expertly aimed and their movements precise. But even as they fought, Elias knew that this was just the beginning. Taking out the general was a victory, but it wouldn't end the war. The Carrick Dominion would not stop until they had crushed humanity, and Elias could feel that same dark presence looming over them. Zirin stood over the general's body, her glowing eyes filled with resolve. This isn't over. The Carrick will retaliate. They'll send more forces after us. Elias nodded, his mind already racing with plans for what came next. We've made our stand today, but we're not done yet. The fight for humanity's future has only just begun. With the general dead and their escape route clear, Elias and his team made their way back to the ship. They had fought against overwhelming odds, and for the moment, they had won. But in the back of his mind, Elias knew the true battle was just beginning. The Carrick would be coming, and this time humanity would be ready. As the Saber's edge rocketed through the silent vastness of space, the faint glow of distant stars their only company, Elias sat in the ship's command center, staring out into the infinite dark. His mind was spinning with the enormity of what had just transpired. The Carrick general was dead. Their strike had succeeded, against all odds, but that success felt hollow in the face of what was to come. Beside him, Zirin stood silently, her gaze also fixed on the stars ahead, her glowing skin flickering faintly in the dim lights of the control room. She, too, was lost in thought, but unlike Elias, her mind was working through calculations, plotting the next course of action, already thinking several moves ahead. The Carrick won't take this lightly, Elias said, breaking the silence. His voice was grim, his eyes narrowing as he turned from the viewport to face Zirin. The Dominion will come after us with everything they have. This won't be a simple retaliation. They'll be ruthless. Zirin nodded, her posture tense.
Yes.
And that's why we need to be prepared. The general's death was a blow to their pride, but the Carrick do not act out of pride alone. They are a deeply strategic empire, and they will see this as an act of war. Her voice softened, though it still carried an underlying current of determination. But that is what we wanted, isn't it? A war we can fight, on our terms. Elias clenched his fists, the weight of her words settling over him. He had always known that fighting the Carrick would be no easy task. But now that it had come to this, the reality was heavier than he had ever imagined. We're still outnumbered. We don't have the resources they do. This isn't like any war humanity has fought before. Zirin stepped forward, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that could almost burn. The Carrick may have the numbers, but we have something they do not. Willpower, unity, and the unknown. We have humanity's spirit, Elias. They've underestimated us for too long, and now they'll pay for it. She was right, of course. Humanity had a resilience that no other species in the galaxy had. The Carrick had made a critical mistake, one that could cost them everything. They had assumed that humanity was weak, fragmented, and primitive. They had not anticipated the strength of the human heart and the drive to survive against all odds. We won't be alone in this, Elias said after a pause, as if reminding himself more than Zirin. There are more who will join us. This attack has already sparked outrage in the neutral systems. The Cylon are contacting us, offering help. And there are other factions, smaller groups that have suffered under Carrick rule for centuries. They'll rally to our cause. Yes, Zirin said, her eyes gleaming. The Carrick might have dominated in sheer power, but they've made too many enemies. This war won't just be between us and them. It'll be a galactic conflict, and in the end, the Carrick will find themselves surrounded. Elias wasn't so sure. While he was grateful for the potential allies, he knew that the Carrick were not just a military threat. They were a deeply entrenched empire, built on centuries of ruthless conquest. They had wiped out entire civilizations before. It would take more than a few resistance cells to bring them down. But Elias wasn't about to voice his doubts. Not now. Not in front of Zirin and the others. They needed hope. They needed belief that they could win, even against impossible odds. "What's our next moves?" Elias asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. Zirin turned, pulling up a holographic map of the galaxy on the console in front of her. Her fingers danced across the surface, pulling up key locations. "We're already in motion. The Carrick fleet will be scrambling to consolidate power after the general's death. We've already received word from several allied factions who will meet us at the edge of Carrick-controlled space. They are ready to strike back." Elias studied the map. There were dozens of planets, stations, and ships spread out across the galaxy. Some of them were already staging areas for resistance operations. But the scale of the conflict was overwhelming. The Carrick were not just an enemy force, they were an entire empire, built on oppression and conquest. The resistance had to fight not just for survival, but for a future free of Carrick tyranny. "How long before we reach our allies?" Elias asked, glancing at the controls. Zirin's voice was filled with calm resolve. "A few hours. They will meet us at an unmarked station just beyond the Zolan Belt. It's neutral ground. We can make our plans there." When the Saber's Edge arrived at the station, the atmosphere was tense, but there was also a sense of purpose in the air. The crew had gathered for the meeting, and Elias stood among them, the weight of the coming decisions pressing heavily on his shoulders. The meeting was attended by leaders of various resistance groups and neutral factions, species that had suffered under Carrick rule and had been waiting for a chance to strike back. These included the Celon, a species known for their diplomacy, the Jar, an insectoid race with a fierce sense of honor, and the Orcs, a technologically advanced people who had once been subjugated by the Carrick before escaping their rule. Each faction brought their own strengths to the table. Elias stood before them, his heart heavy with the responsibility. He wasn't just a soldier now, he was a leader of something much larger than himself. He had to unite these disparate groups under a common banner, one that would make them stronger than the sum of their parts. "We are at a crossroads," Elias began, his voice steady, his gaze sweeping over the room. "The Carrick are a threat not just to Earth, but to every free species in this galaxy. They have taken everything from us, our homes, our families, our very future.
But we will not bow to them.
We will not let them crush us." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Around him, the leaders were nodding, some of them leaning forward in anticipation. "We've already struck a blow against them. The death of their general was a symbol of our resistance," Elias continued. "But this is just the beginning. We must hit them where it hurts. We need to strike at their core, at their leadership, their infrastructure, their fleets. We need to take the fight to them on every front." A murmur of agreement spread across the room. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the chance to rise up against the Carrick, to make their stand and take control of their own destiny. Zirin stepped forward, her voice calm but forceful. "We have the advantage of surprise, and we have allies across the galaxy ready to fight with us. We will strike quickly, strategically, and decisively. But we need to act now, before the Carrick can regroup." Elias looked to the others, his gaze firm. "If we do this, we do it together. No matter how hard it gets. No matter the cost. This fight will determine the fate of every free people in the galaxy. We will win, or we will die trying." The room fell silent for a moment, and then, one by one, the leaders of the factions nodded in agreement. It was time to fight. Time to take the fight to the Carrick and show them that humanity, and all those who sought freedom, would never be crushed. The Carrick might be powerful, but they had no idea what they were truly up against. The resistance had just begun, and no empire, no matter how vast, could stand against the will of the free. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.